Right, we're going to have a look at making a foam board model. Now, the foam board model is going to be a model for your product to have a look and see a bit of development, see how the product's going to turn out. So it's the stage from drawing the product is the next stage, is just making a foam board model. We've also used some softwood here for the legs. So this is a model of a table, and the materials we're going to use a pencil, we're going to use a scalpel, a steel ruler, and a hot glue gun. Okay? When we're using the hot glue gun, the safety rules are we keep it on the stand. Obviously, with a hot glue, if you get it on you, it's hot and it's glue, so it'll stick to your fingers. If you do get it on you, just run over, get your hands under the tap quickly, but just take extra care, and you know, when it comes out, it will continue coming out. Once you squeeze the trigger, it will come out for some time. So just take extra care when using the hot glue gun. Okay? When we're cutting the foam board, we use the foam board. To cut the foam board, we use a cutting mat. This is called a self-healing cutting mat. As you cut, the blade actually runs into the cutting mat, and that makes it much easier to cut, and it also doesn't blunt the tip of the blade. When we're cutting the foam board, use the grid squares on the cutting mat. You can see the grid squares here, and if you can line the ruler up with the grid squares, it means you're going to be cutting at 90 degrees. So I'm going to cut there to cut a rectangle. When you're cutting the foam board, use a sharp scalpel, and we have the scalpel at about 30 degrees. That gives an optimum cut. And then we take one line with a steel ruler, 2 and 3 cuts. And that should just come apart really easily. We don't want to be sawing it. We don't want a sawing motion. We just put the steel ruler, line it up with the grid squares on the mat, and cutting. So there's a foam board rectangle. When we're doing an internal cut, we look at an internal cut, and we look closely at this. We're doing this internal cut here, and what we're going to do, I want to cut out this rectangle inside. And when you're doing that, if you start at the corner, use the steel ruler again, 30 degrees, cut away. So into the corner, cut away, turn round, into the corner and cut away, 3 cuts, into the corner there, cutting away right to the end, and then you might need to just make those cuts into each corner like that. And that should just push out. A little bit of cleaning up there. Push out. So if I wanted a table, my table's going to have a clear panel there. I've got that. For making the clear panel, you can see that. For making the clear panel, I can use this HIPS, high impact polystyrene sheet. The same thing, cutting this, line it up with the squares on the mat here. Line your ruler up with the cutting mat, and with the HIPS it's a case of making cuts, 1, 2, 3. Generally won't cut through it, but what you'll find is if you just bend it backwards and forwards, that will break the HIPS off, and then we can use that to stick in. So I'm going to just over here. 2, 3, bending it, and last of all we're going to put our little model together. So now we've made a tabletop, tiny blobs of hot glue. We don't need a lot of hot glue here, so we just put a tiny blob of hot glue there. It'll work quite quickly with the hot glue because obviously it does cool down. It's a thermoplastic. Careful not to get that on your fingers. So there's a clear panel. And I've also got some MDF here. Now, if you wanted to make legs, depending on really your own choice, you can cut you could cut, I'm just going to put a small amount of hot glue on there. So you might want to make foam board legs, or you could, we have some small amounts of MDF, and you could make MDF legs. Obviously you might want to trim those, you might want to add stretchers. So what we want is, what we're aiming for is a basic model to just show, so that you can look and see the dimensions and the proportions of the table that you want to make. So that is our initial development model, foam board model for our table.